Hello and welcome to the National D-Day Memorial's Victory Garden. This is an outdoor exhibit we use as an educational resource to teach visitors about the importance of victory gardens in World War II, how people were urged to grow their own food, and we also use it as a science lab for visiting school groups to talk about the importance of good soil, good water, and good nutrition. This is almost entirely maintained by volunteers, and we're fortunate this morning to have a couple in here with us. This is Lori, who how long have you been volunteering for our Victory Garden?
I believe it's been 7 years now.
Wow. And why? Why do you do this?
Why do I do it? Well, actually, my original draw here to the Victory Garden was the National D-Day Memorial and the history of it. And then I enjoy gardening as well, and with Bedford Area Master Gardener Association, I'm allowed to do both things.
Excellent. And Debbie is over here, another of our volunteers, out here getting her hands dirty. What have you plucked up there?
Dandelions, of course. Plenty of those around here.
Yeah, well, anytime you have a garden, weeding is part of it. So, Lori, Debbie, tell us a little bit about what we have planted in here and what this might have looked like in 1944 if it was someone's backyard victory garden.
All right, well, the Victory Gardens here in Bedford County came along in a rural area. So some of the cities had a different story, but in the rural areas, many of the families already had farms. So people decided through the leadership of the garden societies that were here in the county that they would actually build separate victory gardens, kind of in a national unity, a support of the troops. That kind of idea is behind it. It started in World War I when people were starving in Eastern Europe, but we took it up in America as a supportive kind of action. And so we could tell you about the garden here a little bit. In the garden, in the home gardens or the victory gardens that they would have had compatible planting, and which we have in all of our beds now. We have celery and okra. We have in this garden over here, we have basil, asparagus, and tomatoes. And so the way it works scientifically, or if you want to look at your garden and you want things that are going to be beneficial to each other, be symbiotic, the basil is going to help the asparagus because it keeps away the asparagus beetles. It emits some kind of a chemical that the beetles don't like, and so that makes this asparagus plant healthy. The asparagus, which is almost as tall as myself, has to grow about 3 years before you can harvest it. And once you harvest it, unlike the basil where you might want to cook with it, you pluck off a leaf or two as needed.
Truck passing by.
Okay. Anyway, this asparagus, you have to wait about 3 years, and then you'll come down into just below the soil and you'll harvest it there. You'll cut it with your kitchen knife. But the asparagus also works with tomatoes. If you want the best combination in your garden, asparagus and tomatoes love each other. The asparagus will emit a chemical that puts off into the soil, and it gets rid of the nematodes. And the nematodes are little multicellular, we call them worms. They're not technically worms if you want to look that up, but they're insects in the ground that will go towards the roots and kill plants. And so the asparagus emits this chemical which the tomatoes love, so they're not attacked by those. And the tomatoes we have here, in this garden, we have two different varieties of heirloom tomatoes. So these are non-hybrid tomatoes. That means the seeds, once you pluck off the seeds of these tomatoes, once they're ripe and you dry them and you can plant them again, you'll get the same exact plant. Now the other ones that they have on the market, and they're all over, and really the science of World War II helped with this, that we have hybrids. And so the hybrids are much more protected from insects and so on, the things I'm talking about with these plants. But these heirloom plants, we have two different varieties here. We have Early Girl and we have Kellogg Breakfast. So if you want to find out about those. I don't think we actually have any red tomatoes in our garden this year. We have purples and oranges and so on. But so anyway, this whole community thrives on each other in this combination, and you'll see that a lot in the Victory Gardens. In the Victory Gardens, if you pull up old footage of it, you'll see row planting, so a big plot, row planting, but essentially you'll see the vegetables that are next to each other, or even the fruits, are compatible. So you wouldn't put two things that aren't compatible. Garlic goes with like everything except for cucumbers. If you saw garlic and cucumbers in there, in that pot, the garlic will probably be fine. The cucumbers, you'll say, what's wrong with them? So these are things to think about when you do plant a garden. So, and I'd like to just show you one thing over here, if I could.
Come on by.
Just right behind you. I'm gonna pluck this, John, just to show you that last fall, so you can plant in the spring and the fall. And last fall we planted this. Ooh, it's gonna be tough because he's big. We planted garlic. And here we have a whole garlic. So that's something you can do as an experiment. You can go to the, excuse me, the grocery store and get a whole garlic clove, excuse me, and plant the individual cloves, and they'll come out and you'll have a whole garlic.
That is a big garlic.
Mm-hmm.
And you're making me hungry this morning
right,
because
and it
I love
smells good.
asparagus, I love tomatoes,
Yeah.
I love garlic.
It smells good.
So that's great. Part of gardening is keeping the pests out. So you'll notice the fence around to keep deer.
Okay.
We have a lot of deer here at the memorial. Rabbits, groundhogs. But what about insects?
We have plenty of insects. Now, some are good and some are bad, just like the rodents. We don't necessarily care about the rodents as far as, but we need to have our fruit. We want to eat our vegetables and so on, so we have to overcome that population. The only way to overcome the deer population is with this tall fence. We can overcome the rabbit population. They come in and nibble on what they want, and we produce more than we need, and so that's not really a problem necessarily. But we also have some smaller things, not as small as the nematodes, but I can show you over here. So we wonder sometimes why do our tomato plants look just a little puny? They should be a little fuller. It's the end of July. And we have found our source, or one of our sources, that we have right here. If you can see where I'm pointing, this is a tomato hornworm. And that hornworm is probably one of the biggest I've ever seen, but you can see he's eating this whole tomato. And when they're done with the tomatoes, they actually like the leaves as well. And so if you're looking at your plant and you're not sure why it doesn't look as healthy as it might, you want to look around for insects or any kind of other critters who might be chomping on it.
Now you have your vegetables in here to eat, but you also have a number of flowers.
We do. So the Victory Garden, many of them, especially in Bedford County here in Virginia, the garden clubs had flower gardens. And when the war effort was going on, they said they were transitioning their flower gardens into vegetable gardens in support of what was going on. And so we have both represented here. We have plenty of flowers. We have black-eyed Susans, and we have catmint. So we have annuals, which are the black-eyed Susans. So these black-eyed Susans will come up every year because they're annuals. We talked about the asparagus. That's a perennial, so that will come up on its own as well. This is a perennial. All right, cut that part. These are perennials, so they come up every year on its own, just like the asparagus. But all the other vegetables are annuals, so we have to plant those by seed or by plant starts. We have rebloomers, which are, this is a catmint. So around Memorial Day, it was blooming beautifully, and then those blooms were dying off. We trimmed it back, if you can believe it or not. We trimmed it back, and now it's blooming again. That's a rebloomer. And so we have a variety. You can see that we have butterfly attractors. We have hyssops, they're butterfly attractors. We have hummingbird attractors, which are the gladiolas in the back.
And how about bees? I know we're talking mainly to an audience of kids, and kids don't like bees very much, but they're kind of important, aren't they?
Well, bees are very important pollinators, but really all insects are very important. And so if you're gardening, if you can help it, we like to tend our garden culturally. So that means we try not to spray any kind of chemicals here in this garden. And so far this year, the only thing we needed to do, we've had some mold, we've used some natural oils, but you can use other combinations that are not technically pesticides that you can keep your garden healthy in. And that's just a personal decision. But either way you go, you want to make sure you have the right ingredients or you're using that product, correctly, and that there's a need. But But here in the garden, we generally just culturally, if you see some deadness on a plant, you want to identify it, try to figure out what it is. But you can remove that. You just don't put it in your recycling. You try to keep your diseased parts of your plants out of your recycling, and then all the other parts of your plants or the grass, so on, can go into your recycle or your composting bin.
So great. Well, of course, we're not in a massive world war today. We don't have to grow food. We don't have a rationing system. But still, it's a very rewarding hobby for kids, isn't it?
It is. You can start, like I said, with a seed. In a week or two, you'll start to see a plant, and then you just get to take care of that until you have a fruit. And you can do one plant generally, or you could do a whole garden. Either way, it's fun. These are edible things, so ultimately you're gonna eat them. And sometimes you could do a salsa garden, figure out what that means, you know, what plants would go in that, and then in the end you can make salsa, you can make tomato sauce, you can make a pizza. We have herbs over here. So many of the herbs, if you're interested in herbs, are originated in tropical areas, so like Central Africa or Southeast Asia. And so we have lemon balm. This year we have peppermint and thyme, curly parsley, oregano, chives, those kinds of things. All those things are edible and they go into the food you eat. And the next time you're eating a food, you can read the package and see if any of these are in there. So, and that's the fun of it. That's the fun of it. You get to eat something when you're done.
Absolutely. And of course, you're going to be learning more about how people on the home front in World War II fed themselves with victory gardens and about the rationing this week. But let me encourage you to get outdoors, get your hands dirty, plant a few things, and of course, eat your veggies. So thanks, and we'll see you soon.